The original Pokemon trading card game, I'm sure, is one of those games that is responsible for many a broken Game Boy Color, and that would be due to a single, very innocuous screen. Oh boy. I see this face sometimes in my nightmares now, by the way. The cute little Pikachu coin, so absolutely just, you want to strangle it, don't you? In all seriousness, what would the game look like if we decided not to interact with this coin flip mechanic at all? We will be playing through the entirety of this game, asking the question, can you beat the original Pokemon trading card game without ever causing a coin flip? So we made our character. No Coin is indeed crazy about Pokemon and Pokemon card collecting. Thank you for telling me that about myself. I wasn't aware. I guess this is the perfect challenge for us then. Starting off the game, we are met with Dr. Mason. Dr. Mason's going to set us up with his boy, Sam, who's going to give us a tutorial battle, and there's a coin flip already. So obviously we're not going to count the beginning of duels, otherwise the whole thing falls apart. We're just going to go ahead and say that our opponent's flipping the coin for us. Sam's going to go ahead and show us the ropes, and everything's going swimmingly until we are required to use Star Freeze. Star Freeze is an attack from Starmie that's going to do 20 damage and cause us to immediately fail the challenge. It's very stressful. We're not going to count the tutorial, okay? This is all on rails. We can't do anything about it. We're going to have our boy do the one coin flip that he's actually allowed to do. Enjoy it while you can, because it's the only one you're going to get. We then picked up the Charmander and Friends deck. I'm assuming this will have the fewest coin flips, as a lot of the water and grass type Pokemon either deal with paralysis or poison and confusion and stuff like that. So Charmander seemed like the safest bet, which is what I was going to choose anyway. Charmander supremacy. I know, I'm that guy. Moving forward, just real quick before we get too far into the challenge, this honestly might be a good second monitor video. The screen is going to flash quite consistently. I've done a ton of work to make this not an epilepsy issue, but I don't know if I've done a good enough job. This game has a ton of flashes in it, so just keep that in mind as we go forward. Looking through our deck, obviously we're going to be pretty good into the Grass Club, so we're going to head there first. At that point, we will meet our rival, Ronald Clown-ass name-having dork. This guy is... what a fucking dork. I can't take this man seriously. This man, you're not that guy, pal. No shade, by the way, if your name is Ronald. It's just this dude is a total narcissist. We'll get into exactly why later and why I cannot take this man seriously at all. But anyway, I decided to fight one of the trainers in the Grass Club, although apparently this person didn't get the memo that they're in fact, the Grass Club. I'm sitting here looking at a Ghastly, a Machop, a Charmander. This woman literally has one grass type. You realize you're in the grass type club, right? We claim that victory, really no problem, and in the first booster, we actually get two pretty solid pulls and a double colorless energy and an energy removal. Me, personally, big fan of energy removals. If you can manage to get the energy advantage on your opponent, you can pretty much lock them out of some of the high value cards in their deck. Of note, at this point in the challenge, I wasn't entirely sure exactly what I wanted the rule set to be. Initially, it was just going to be any time that you use a card that says flip a coin, or say you did something that would make your opponent flip a coin immediately, we wouldn't be able to use that. However, I also decided to extend that to something like Sand Attack here, which reads, if the defending Pokemon tries to attack during your opponent's next turn, your opponent flips a coin if Tails Attack does nothing. Essentially, what I had settled on was that if you do something that causes a coin flip to happen, you would have to reset the duel, essentially. This means that confusion is going to be one of the worst case scenarios in the entire game. It is actively worse than just getting knocked out, but we will touch on that in a little bit. Speaking of someone who's absolutely not shying away from using their coin-based RNG skills, the Master of the Grass Club, Nikki. I'm actually really worried about this fight. Yes, we do have pretty massive type advantage. However, she has an Executor card, which can output absolutely insane amounts of damage and is very bulky and quite difficult to take down. Starting off the battle with Nikki, I get a pretty lucky first draw. We grab a Machop and a Magmar. It'll allow me to essentially start off with immediate pressure with a Machop while building up a fire-based Pokemon in the back. And immediately we are put to sleep. Now, we are allowed to do sleep checks. We're not the one that caused that coin flip to happen, so it is allowed in this challenge. I decided I'm going to start beefing up the Magmar. He's going to be my sweep for this entire battle. We go for the sleep check. We are, of course, still sleeping. Machop, one EP boy. I think I'm just going to use Machop as sort of a sacrificial lamb here. Machop eventually is knocked out. We decided to go into Eradicate, and this is what I was worried about. Executor is on the field. You see, Executor has an attack called Big Egg Explosion. It will allow you to flip a number of coins equal to the number of energy cards attached to Executor. For every heads, that's going to do 20 additional damage. 20 damage for 1 energy is what makes cards like Hitmonchan so good. So being able to stack that is very, very powerful. However, it's only a 50-50 that it actually works out for you. And yeah, our Eradicate is going down here. Didn't even stand a chance. Magmar is set in the main area. We throw out a Fire Punch, which will be enough to knock out the Executor, and that is a huge amount of pressure relieved off of us. However, now we do have the Ivysaur in play, and yep, we're getting poisoned, of course. Interestingly enough, poison being one of those status moves that we actually can use. As long as the application doesn't require a coin flip, we may actually be able to use poison in a couple of our duels later once we get ourselves a grass deck set up. We then throw out yet another Fire Punch, which will do a solid 60 damage and a one-hit knockout onto the Ivysaur. Bloom comes in, and they decide to go for another poison powder. We're already poisoned. Doesn't really do anything, but we're gonna die between turns anyway. Or sorry, faint rather. I always called it dying. I mean, I think most people do realistically, but anyway, Rattata comes in, energy removal on the Gloom. Again, like I said, really a big fan of the energy removals. I think it's one of the most powerful board states you can get into, is winning the advantage as far as energies. Another poison powder comes up. This is fine. Rattata having no retreat cost means that we can freely switch it into our Ponyta, go for the Flame Tail and the knockout on Gloom. Big Explosion comes out for 20 damage. Potion on the Ponyta takes care of that damage before just throwing another Flame Tail into the Executor with a plus power for a little bit extra damage. I'm gonna be honest, not really sure why I did that. Big Explosion coming through again, doing no damage at all. Just go for the Smash Kick, knock out the Executor. We now have 2 Ivysaurs in play, unfortunately. Another Poison Powder comes in, that'll be 20 damage, and actually, we're going to get knocked out at a very unfortunate turn. So we will be knocked out after this turn, which is actually really bad because it means we have to bring in a Pokemon from the bench that will then be able to take an attack without the opponent having to attack to knock out our Pokemon. So I decided to run in a switch, go to the Rattata, and then I switch it back out into the Ponyta to get rid of the poison. Flame Tail comes out for the 1-turn knockout, and we get to keep our Ponyta in play, at least for 1 more turn. We do eat the Hypnosis, we go to sleep, however, we are immediately cured of that sleep, and it is essentially curtains at this point. Going for the Flame Tail, gonna be another 1-hit knockout on the Execute, picking up our final prize card and winning us the Grass Badge. I think they're called medals in this game. Obtaining the Grass Medal, rather. In one of the booster packs I got from this battle, I got a Magnemite that had a move called Magnetic Storm that I really don't get why you would ever want to do this. We did, however, get crazy lucky with a Mewtwo pull on our essentially 4th pack here. Really nice to have that super early. Gonna be very useful once we make that Psychic deck. Also, dude, the winky faces. I don't like the winky face, man. Surely I'm not the only one who think that's weird, right? Like, that just feels weird. I then tried to make a grass deck to move on to the next club, but I didn't really have the cards to do so. So I decided to do a couple of duels with Aaron, as all you can get from winning this duel with Aaron are energy cards, which are always going to be useful to have. After a while, I am able to piece together a water and grass deck. Generally, when I make a deck, I like to have a lot of trainer cards, as they're just very flexible and dexterous, but I also like to have a main type in my decks, and then I like to have a couple of Pokemon cards that will cover the weakness of that deck. So you see I have grass here, weak to fire, of course. I want to have a couple water type Pokemon that I can splash in there, as well as I don't have that many cards to begin with, so I kind of need to have that second type just to make a fully functioning deck. In this game, you need 60 cards in order for a deck to be considered complete. It was then time to move on to the Water Club. After beating one of the trainers there, I got a booster pack with a Pikachu in it, one of the few electric type Pokemon that I'm actually allowed to use, as well as this incredibly menacing Electrode. Jeez, that boy is ominous, man. As menacing as this man is, he will be an absolutely valuable member of the team later on, so don't make fun of him. Just let him have his moment. We will not, however, be using him in the Rock Club, although we will be using a single Bulbasaur evolved into an Ivysaur to take down the Rockmaster. Literally, this one Bulbasaur was able to knock out every single Pokemon that he put out. Good on him. In the lobby of the Rock Club, we are confronted by our rival, and he challenges us to a duel. In exchange, he'll give us a rare card. One of the cards that he will give you is a Super Energy Retrieval. This card is incredibly good, so I definitely want to win these duels with him. Starting off the duel, we put Seal in the active zone and a Bulbasaur on the bench zone. I guess I could just call it a bench. I don't really need to be calling it bench zone, but anyway, he brings out his Cubone, one of the most frustrating Pokemon early game. He's gonna Snivel, which just means we really can't do any damage to him. It's not as bad as Scrunch. Scrunch means no damage goes through. At least Snivel, it's like reduced by 20, but we have a base power of 10 on our Seal here. Not really working out for us. And this would go on for quite a while, until eventually, about 7 turns in, Cubone will finally start going for Rage. Rage is very scary. For every damage counter on the user, it will inflict additional damage. So doing 10 damage to him really isn't an option. He's going to outpace us and run through our entire team if we leave him on 1 HP. So right now I'm debating setting up for a Dugong sweep. Dugong can do 50 damage, will immediately knock out this Cubone, as well as put up one hell of a fight against everything in the back. But as you can see, I am just not drawing the water energies that I need. It's all grass all day, baby. Eventually, we do finally draw into enough water energies to fire off an Aurora Beam, knocking out the Cubone. Ronald then immediately played another Cubone in the active area before switching it out to a Wartortle. I'm not really sure why he did that. Good play. Good play. But our Dugong is going to go down immediately to a Bite. And at this point, I'm just too far behind in momentum. I'm not going to waste your time on this fight anymore. We lose this. We give it one hell of a fight, but it just doesn't work out. Given that we have such a valuable card on the line, I decide to restart the duel, save and load back from Diary. We get that same Seal again, putting it back on the active zone. Zubat goes onto the bench. We are immediately met with a Lapras that is just going to pelt us with water guns. Our Seal would go down to 6 minimum powered water guns. But with that in mind, we would have a Zubat ready to go. And it's at this point that Lapras finally decides to start throwing out these Confuse Rays. Confuse Ray, absolutely worst case scenario in this challenge, as either trying to retreat or attack will both trigger a coin flip. It's essentially just a free knockout unless we can pick up a full heal. And my logic behind that was actively choosing to attack or choosing to try and retreat would be an action that causes a coin flip. While infrequent, it will happen from time to time, and this would be one of them. So I'm actually pretty curious, how would you rule confusion in this game, given that it is the opponent's action, the opponent's attack rather, that causes the confusion, which causes the coin flip? But then again, when you select the option, you are opting into the coin flip. I'm not really sure. However, it doesn't end up mattering too much, as our opponent will switch into Arcanine, taking us down with a powerful takedown. Notably, we'll do some very vital chip damage to this Arcanine as well. I then decide to put a Clefairy Doll onto the field. My hope is that he's going to use Takedown on it, or Flamethrower. I guess either option is really good. We either get a bit of damage onto the Arcanine with a Takedown, or if he uses Flamethrower, he has to discard one of his fire energies. There really are no wrong answers, and this Clefairy Doll is going to really help us build momentum going forward. Ronald opts for the Flamethrower option, probably the smart option to be honest, but that will allow us to send in our Rattata and get that all-important chip damage onto the Arcanine, who will knock out our Rattata. However, at that point, we're able to use a Guillotine to knock out the Arcanine, and one of the biggest threats against our team is now taken care of. Pinsir is also able to knock out the Marowak, while a Charmander is set onto the field. Unfortunately, that Ember is going to do plenty of damage to our Pinsir, knocking it out, but I do kind of realize he's burning through his fire energy really quickly, which is quite common for a fire deck, I suppose. But we now have Dugong in play yet again. We set our Seal onto the field. We're able to pick up the Charmander KO with a plus power boosted headbutt. That means that it's going to do 10 damage, doubled because it's super effective, and then an extra 10 damage on top, which is just enough for the KO here. We managed to evolve our Seal into a Dugong, and at this point, we're looking pretty good. This Wartortle is very clearly stalling us out, but it's only a matter of time until he fails that coin flip. I don't like your strategy very much. I don't care for it one bit. Yes, what if I had a 50% chance to just waste everyone's time? It's wonderful, I love it. But eventually they would miss that coin flip, allowing for us to pick up 2 consecutive knockouts on both a Wartortle and a Squirtle, before sending out his final Pokemon in a Charmeleon, and we are in a wonderful position here. We can one-shot this Charmeleon. We do so, winning the duel. only then to realize that this is not the card that I wanted, actually. I don't even care about this Jigglypuff card in the slightest. I do think I end up using it at some point. That's just because our options are so limited. And I guess we could talk about just how limited our options are in the entire game, not in cards that we have, but in the entire game. A total of 40 cards that are completely unusable, 63 of these sort of half cards that we can use where one of their effects will be a coin flip, the other one we're able to use, and 81 of them are completely usable. However, there are a lot of quote-unquote technically usable cards, but they don't actually do anything or really don't help us with our goals, and that's nothing to mention that we come by these cards via RNG, so while yes, there are plenty of cards for us to use, we're not guaranteed to have any or all of them at any given time, so just kind of keep that in mind. And that is why you'll notice I always have a Hitmonchan in my deck, along with some Rattatas, Hitmonchan just being one of the best cards in the format, and Rattata being a very, very nice pivot piece with a very cheap 20 damage attack. I'm kind of thinking that maybe our grass and water deck would perform well against the Water Club Master Amy, so we're going to run over there and give that a try. Starting off with Amy, we managed to nab a Bulbasaur right off the bat. Unfortunately, that will be our only Pokemon that we have available to us, so this is looking kinda scary. Amy sets a Lapras, which is just, again, going to be pelting us with water guns. Managed to draw into a second Bulbasaur, which we immediately place on the bench. We evolve our Bulbasaur into an Ivysaur to dodge the confusion, responding with a Poison Powder. So this Lapras's time is limited, unless they just switch out, right? They could just do that, but still, that gets us some energy advantage. Not a bad thing per se, and it means that we don't have to contend with those Confuse Rays anymore. Another Poison Powder will force that Squirtle to retreat into a fresh Squirtle. However, keep in mind that Squirtle in the back line, very, very weak, that will be vital later, is what I would say if I could draw into any Pokemon at all. We would unfortunately lose this first duel due to lack of bench Pokemon. Luckily, we can just try again, and we lost again. Okay, wonderful. Awesome, very, very nice. This time, at least, it was a Blastoise that took us out. And it was at that point I decided, even if we can't use a lot of the electric type Pokemon, maybe there's a couple that we can run. Example, Voltorb and that Electrode that we got earlier, both solid options. We would mostly be running Pikachus, just because, bear in mind, most electric type Pokemon have coin flips associated with them. They love their paralysis checks. So we would be able to try again, and yet again, we lose here. Our first hand is just kind of abysmal, and Smokescreen really gives us grief through the entirety of this battle. Although you'll see by the end screen, it was actually pretty close, and we were on track to win. Clearly our deck is just a little bit imbalanced. Honestly, that's fine, we just need to win one time. Let's move on to the fourth attempt with Amy. But before that fourth battle, I decided to check the PC to see if it had any booster packs. We did. We also had some of those weird winky faces that the professor gives us.
I don't like where this is going.
But enough of that, on to the fourth battle with Amy. First thing, we drew into a Voltorb and were able to place that as the active Pokemon, as well as on our first turn, a Rattata to put on the bench. We were then able to evolve into an Electrode, and you can see I'm hovering Chain Lightning here, correctly guessing that this is going to be a very, very useful move for us to use in this battle, because Amy actually abides by club policy and uses mostly water Pokemon. After a mix of Chain Lightnings and energy removals, we're able to knock out the Lapras without being confused, as well as doing some valuable damage to those bench Pokemon, which will be very relevant later. Seeking replaces Lapras. I decide to use a Gust of Wind on it. I want to get a little bit more chip damage on this Seeking before I expose my Electrode to it, which sounds like just the worst innuendo. Alright, no, but we do bring in the Horsey. I don't want to deal with Smokescreen, so we're going to get it out of play. Of course, they'll bring back in the Seeking. I don't want my Electrode to go down, so I actually opt to swap into Rattata to get 20 more damage onto the Seeking, which will allow the knockout on the next turn. Rattata gets knocked out, but we are then able to knock out the Seeking, and the next turn, the Goldeen for the win. So glad that's over. I am so glad we don't have to do that again. Apparently, water decks are going to be our weakness. I'm just glad that we don't have to do that again, right? Nah, I'm just playing, probably. So anyway, next, I decided to head off to the Electric Club, and there are actually some really good fighting and ground type Pokemon that we can use, although we do have to be a little bit careful with some of their moves, as say Sandshrew. We won't be able to use the Sandshrew line. Sandslash really loves their Fury Swipes, and Sand Attack is off limits as well. I then about had a meltdown trying to figure out why the Clefairy doll was so useless. What? Why the fuck is it's the same thing? What? Dude, what's the difference? Hold on. Play Mysterious Fossils if it were a basic Pokemon. While in play. Why is this one a rare? What's so special? It's literally just a Mysterious Fossil with a star next to it. That means it's rarer, by the way. It's actually less useful than the Mysterious Fossil. Yeah, anyway, I don't really get that one. But onto the Electric Club. And here we will find one of the easiest trainers to fight in the game. We will be battling this trainer a lot to get free cards, essentially, as they use a Pikachu deck. The Pikachu deck being unique in that it has an electric-type Pokemon that's using a water-type move, which is pretty unique, but honestly, the cards themselves are, well, really not that good. Or I guess you could have an electric-type Pokemon in a water deck, though I don't really know why you'd want that, considering I'm pretty sure this is a water attack anyway. Maybe you want it for the fighting resistance, I guess? I don't know. It's probably the best card in the game, let's be honest. I just don't see its use cases. After defeating the 3 peons in the area, we would then challenge Isaac, the zapping self-destruct deck. As you may be anticipating, he uses self-destruct, which does a lot of damage. Self-destruct is a bit unique in this game in that it will do damage not only to your opponent, but also to yourself, and also to every bench Pokemon in play. However, we can actually use his own strategy against him in a rather clever way, but we'll get into that a little bit into the duel. First turn, we're able to put a Bulbasaur onto the field, as our opponent will set an Electabuzz. And you can see already my opponent's side of the field is looking pretty stacked. And honestly, it looks really rough for us at the moment. But this right here is exactly what I want. I want him to have as many Pokemon on his side of the field as possible, while I have only one Pokemon on my bench. As it turns out, knocking out your own Pokemon, not the greatest strategy. Self-destruct is actually really, really risky, and you will almost always win the war of attrition as long as you have fewer benched Pokemon than your opponent. So not a particularly good strategy. I'm not really sure how this man became a club master with this strategy specifically, unless he's sending actual bombs to people's houses. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I got one in the, in the mailbox. Probably check that later. But you can't send that through the mail. It's illegal. I can't think of many ways you can transport a bomb now that I think about it. They're all illegal. We managed to send out a Diglett with 2 fighting energies on it. This will allow it to use Mud Slap, which means it's going to one-shot most of the cards on the opponent's side of the field. However, it is of course very, very frail. Luckily, we do have that resistance to electric type damage, meaning that we can pretty much wall this Electabuzz. This will allow Diglett to knock out the Electabuzz. And keep in mind the damage thresholds that we're working with here. We can only do 60 damage. Electabuzz only has 70 HP. Because of the chip damage from the self-destruct that this Electabuzz took and the next Electabuzz in the back, he's going to lose this game off that one self-destruct. And while yes, things seem simple at this point, I do still see one way that I lose. If somehow this Voltorb on the bench gets set up, one of the Electrode cards has a move called Sonic Boom, which does not take weakness and resistance into account, so we could lose this battle. But we're going to go ahead and play around that. We're going to get it set up so that we can evolve into a Dugtrio if needed. But for now, Mud Slap takes out the Electabuzz, and the Voltorb on the next turn, giving us the Lightning Medal. And of course, you can hand over those booster packs as well. Another Dragonite. Dude, I need Dragonair and Dratini. I unironically really like Dragonair. Well, would you look at that. Up next, we're going to be headed to the Fire Club. As I'm looking through the water Pokemon that we can use, I think playing into Dugong is probably our best bet. It's true we will only be able to use one of their moves. That's fine. Aurora Beam is going to be essentially carrying us through this club anyway, so perfectly fine with not being able to use Ice Beam. I then trade, quote-unquote, all of my energies. Realistically, it's just the energies that aren't inside of a deck. So what we did was we put all of our energies except for one inside of an active deck, and we gave this kid 1 energy. He then told us the location of a Slowpoke card, which, whatever, it's fine. I don't actually think we end up using it, although technically we could. Interestingly enough, the hardest part about this, I keep wanting to call them gyms. They're not gyms, they're clubs. The hardest part of this club would actually just be this dude named John. He kept leading with Tauros and just clicking Rampage or Rage, and it was absolutely blasting my team. These moves are a pretty big threat to us. For every damage counter on Tauros, they will actually do additional damage. So with our deck that does this death by 1,000 cuts sort of strategy, it's pretty rough. I think I had to fight this guy 2 or 3 times. Eventually we got the win on him, but just saying, that card is kind of incredible. Luckily, by the end, we were able to get our Dugong set up and finally sweep past this monstrosity, which leads into Ken, the Fire Club Master. Mostly use strategies that revolve around doing high damage to the opponent, but also some recoil damage to himself, and also he has 2 of those Tauros cards, so we just need to be really careful. Be sure to claim our knockouts relatively quick on those Tauros. Don't let Arcanine get set up, or if you do, throw something like a Pokédoll in front of it so it can do all that damage to itself. Our first hand is an Immaculate one, allowing us to play a Hitmonchan on the active area and a Rattata on the bench. Of course we go second, why wouldn't we? And our opponent will set a Chansey. Now this is more annoying than anything, though we do have a type advantage so we can do some crazy damage right off the bat. Now what I'm assuming he's going to do with this Chansey is he's going to let it get a bunch of damage counters and then you scoop up on it, which will essentially allow him to stall me out a bit and get his bench Pokemon set up. It's a pretty annoying strategy, but it can be countered by unexpected spikes in damage, which is of course something our Hitmonchan is going to be able to do very effectively. He actually ends up letting the Chansey go down. I'm just assuming he didn't have a scoop up to use the strategy with. He's going to send in a Growlithe after that knockout. We could take the knockout on the Growlithe the next turn. I decided to use a Gust of Wind to bring in the Tauros and get the one-hit knockout on it. I'm way more scared about the Tauros than I am about this Growlithe, as we just saw how powerful that card can be. I'm not scarred about this card, which rhymes, accidentally. We take the knockout on the Tauros, and he sends out another Chansey, and he gets very lucky with his Scrunch turns. After a while, he changes it into a Growlithe. I swap over to Starmie for super effective damage, which in turn causes him to switch Growlithe into a Jigglypuff. I think this is the most switching we've seen in any of these games so far. And I decided to take a look at his benched Pokemon, and I realize I've won the game at this point. This is essentially a checkmate. I have won the game. He has 2 wounded Growlithes, which means he's going to go into Magmar. Magmar's not ready to attack this turn, so I actually retreat here, go back into Hitmonchan, special punch the Jigglypuff, and I very obvious clear path to victory now. This is essentially a checkmate. Magmar's not ready to attack, and anything else will go down in 1 hit from a Hitmonchan, so that'll net us the Fire Medal. And then I decided to take a bit of a break. And booting up the game, we're going to the Fire Club again? I forgot to save. That's fine, whatever. We would actually have to do the Fire and Electric gyms again, but I'm not going to go over them again. They weren't really that big of a problem. Although there was one duel in the Electric Club against this guy Brandon. Absolutely blasted him. First turn KO'd him. All he had was a Voltorb. I had a Machop. Easiest win of my life. I would be very, very upset if I were this kid. Shake my hand. Shake my hand. Good game. Shake my hand. After rebattling Isaac, we managed to get a Mew card, and honestly, this card really confuses me. So we have Psywave, which does more damage based off of how many energy cards are on the opposing Pokemon. But this De-Evolution Beam, essentially it allows you to choose an evolved Pokemon, either yours or your opponent's, and return the highest stage evolution card on that Pokemon to its player's hand. It doesn't say anything about removing energies, removing damage counters, unless that's a just standard rule of the game where you remove damage counters or something. I mean, wouldn't they just play the card again next turn? Although I suppose if the evolved Pokemon has more damage counters on it than its unevolved counterpart has HP, maybe that would immediately result in a KO. I would think that would be about the only useful situation to use that in, aside from some really niche strategies that only trigger when a Pokemon is evolved or something. I don't get this one, which probably means that it's absolutely broken. I have a terrible time sussing out things like this. I don't know, if you have any way that this could possibly be used, please let me know in the comments down below. It was then time to fight Ronald too, and I'm pretty sure this is the one that actually gives you the super energy retrieval, but at this point our deck is pretty well solid, and this duel actually goes down without much issue. Although there was a weird moment when Ronald used a gust of wind, Jinx was out, and they easily could have gotten the knockout, but they brought out my Pokédoll for some reason, and yeah, I mean, they get the knockout on the Pokédoll, but why though? But anyway, we win that duel and receive our super energy retrieval, a very useful card in my casual playthrough. Ironically enough, I don't think I end up using it at all in this run, but it is always in my deck. I then decided it's time to go to the Psychic Club. Now, Psychic is the weakness of other Psychic cards, so my thought is I'll just make a normal deck, and at least we'll have the resistances. However, with that in mind, we do still keep our Hitmonchan in the deck. Even though he's weak to Psychic type cards, he'll be useful for any sort of coverage that we might need. Alright, so I walk into the Psychic Club, turn left, go into the recreational area of the Psychic Club, meet this dork-ass kid named Robert.
Robert, I don't like this, Robert.
Yeah.
It's pissing me off.
And if you've ever played this game, this face will have been burned into your nightmares. This kid is, what if I put you to sleep the duel? That is all. Most of his strategy relies on the Haunter cards, putting you to sleep and then attempting to use Dream Eater. It ain't great. It is one of the most frustrating strategies in the entire game, as well as being horrifically inconsistent. You have to win 2 coin flips just to be able to attack. It's a big nothing burger, massive waste of time. I have feelings about this if you can't tell, but anyway, moving forward. But with much trials and many tribulations, we are able to defeat Robert. Get your stupid face out of here, kid. How could my ghost deck lose? Bro, it was a 50-50 shot whether you win that duel or not, man. Moving on to our fight with Murray, we were going in neutral. As I mentioned before, I didn't want to have anything that was weak to his deck, and Psychic is the weakness of Psychic. So we're essentially going in with some resistances, and hopefully that will work out to our advantage. Starting off the duel, we go second, of course we do. We play Jigglypuff, our opponent plays Snorlax, and a couple Pokemon on the bench. These two would go back and forth for a little while, neither one really being able to do any significant amount of damage to the other, until finally we're able to evolve our Jigglypuff into a Wigglytuff, and just click Do the Wave, which is a phenomenal move by the way. 10 damage plus 10 more damage for every benched Pokemon that you have. It's a little costly at 3 colorless energy, but 3 colorless is pretty easy to come by, all things considered. However, our opponent then sets a Mr. Mime. Is that anything that does 30 damage or more will end up doing 0 damage to Mr. Mime, so we actually can't do anything with our Wigglytuff here. We have Lullaby and Do the Wave. Lullaby causes a coin flip, can't do it. I do stall out for a few turns, neither one of us can really do any damage to the other, until eventually switching into a Rattata, throwing out 20 damage, putting Mr. Mime at half HP. This will cause them to switch into a Chansey. I'm pretty sure they're going to go for the stall plus scoop up strats. Interestingly enough, I keep mentioning that. I don't think it ever actually happened in this playthrough, but in my casual playthrough, it constantly happened. Like almost every trainer that had a Chansey would likely scoop it up at some point and just kind of throw it out on the field to stall up a bunch of hits. But it didn't really happen this playthrough, interestingly enough. In response, I switched to Hitmonchan, doing 40 damage. They switch back into Mr. Mime, but were able to knock it out with a jab. They then switch in Abra, and I'm a little bit concerned with Abra, actually. Yes, the Psyshock that Abra does only does 10 damage or 20 damage once you account for weakness, but it also has the ability to paralyze us, and that's just not really something that I want to deal with. So I then use Computer Search, which allows us to search our deck in exchange for 2 discards to gain a switch card, which will allow us to switch out Hitmonchan even though he is paralyzed. We swap into Wigglytuff, they bring in Chansey again. We actually decide to leave in Wigglytuff. I could bring in Hitmonchan, but I don't want him to take a bunch of damage, and Wigglytuff's going to do the job just fine. So Wigglytuff will get the KO on that Chansey. Murray then brings out another Chansey. I decide to use a Gust of Wind to bring out an Abra, go for the one-hit knockout. They bring in the Chansey yet again, and they're going for Scrunch strats at this point. And while I'm not actually able to damage the Chansey at all, my mind kind of starts to wander during these duels when the opponents are just stalling us out a bunch. People say that a coin flip is not 50-50. I don't understand how if there's 2 sides and you're only going to land on one of the 2 sides, how that's not 50-50. But, you know, go off. It's probably some weird statistic thing that I don't understand because I'm not that smart. Not that smart at all. I actually looked this up afterwards. Apparently it has to do with whichever side is up when you're physically flipping the coin, and the flip starts, then there's like wobble or something. I don't know exactly what it is, as well as, you know, if you flip a coin the exact same way, you're probably going to get a relatively consistent result. I don't think that has anything to do with the digital card game of Pokemon. I'm assuming that just picks a number, and that should be relatively equal 50-50, but it just goes to show that how even some super obvious stuff can have some really weird nuance to it. So I thought that was interesting. But anyway, our opponent's been scrunching this entire time, and they do switch out into a Kangaskhan, but it really doesn't matter. We just click do the wave until victory, and we have earned our Psychic Medal. If we then talk to the old man in the recreational area of the Psychic Club, he'll give us a promotional card that'll be a Mewtwo card. Very, very good card. It's one of the few cards in the game that's able to pull energy cards from your discard pile. Wait, this card is sick as f***, actually. 40 damage, like that's okay, that's good, that's fine. Energy absorption is very good. Then go to the PC to see if the professor sent us anything new, and he has. He was talking about his Alakazam, like, oh, look at this goober! Oh, look at him! But anyway, it is time to go to the Science Club. This time I decided to use a deck of mostly Psychic and Normal types, with of course our Hitmonchan. I think I bring Hitmonlee as well. He has an ability called Stretch Kick, which allows you to hit the back line as well. Seemed interesting, wanted to give it a try. Skipping ahead to the duel with Rick, the Science Club Master, we're first able to place a Rattata with a Mewtwo on the bench, as our opponent sets a Grimer, and also benches one of those Mewtwo's that we talked about, that promotional card that I said was super good. So definitely need to worry about that in the future, but that is future Newbornkilik's problem. Our Rattata is going to go down next turn. I can't really do too much about that. This paralysis was at a really frustrating time, but we can at least start to get our Mewtwo in the back built up just a little bit. Grimer knocks out our Rattata with more of his nasty goo. I mean, look, if it's bad enough to paralyze you, probably is indeed pretty nasty. This, of course, allows us to place our Mewtwo, which in turn knocks out the Grimer. Our opponent then plays Weezing and immediately self-destructs him. Both of our Pokemon go down, and that would actually lose us the game. Okay, actually hyper unlucky. We didn't draw into many Pokemon. Anyway, moving on to the second attempt. Things would start out the exact same on the second attempt. I actually have more bench Pokemon now, so I'm not as worried about a super quick duel at this point. But with that said, we do start off with a paralysis. So I actually decide I'm going to go into Jigglypuff. I'm just going to let Rattata probably get knocked out. Maybe we can get Jigglypuff set up, you know, do the wave a bit more. I decided to use a potion on Rattata. Normally, I wouldn't say saving a Rattata is a particularly good move, but our Jigglypuff needs a little bit more time, so I think stalling out with this Rattata is probably optimal at the moment. Maybe somewhat predictable, but Grimer knocks out Rattata yet again. However, this means we are able to go into our Jigglypuff. Rattata bought us just enough time. Jigglypuff's able to knock out Grimer, but we have to use Double Edge, which does 20 damage to Jigglypuff. Grimer goes for another nasty goo. Luckily, we don't get paralyzed here. I guess it really didn't matter in the long run anyway, because we're going to use a computer search, discard 2 of our cards, bring out our Wigglytuff card, which would have cleared the paralysis anyway, but now it's time to do the wave. And immediately Weezing comes in and knocks us out again. Okay, I get that this is your strategy, but this just seems excessive at this point. Although I say that, but I'm looking at my backline, and that self-destruct might have actually been a really good idea now that I'm looking at it. Although I guess somewhat predictably, much like when the Electric Club Master used self-destruct and screwed himself over, I have a strange feeling this is also going to be happening for our most esteemed opponent here as well. If for no other reason than it allows our Mr. Mime to get a one-shot on Grimer, which actually puts us at a 2-4 prize card advantage. He then decides to use Conversion 1 to make my Mr. Mime's weakness Psychic, which it already was. Beautiful play. Wonderful. Amazing. Critically acclaimed play. Very useful. Good use of your turn even. But this doesn't seem that helpful in the long run. Porygon then uses Conversion 2 to change its resistance to Psychic, of which it was already Psychic. I get the feeling you're not really taking this duel too seriously, buddy. Rick, you think you're better than me? You think you're better than all of us? Anyway, we then switch into Rattata to get the KO on the Porygon. I then decide I want to use my new Mewtwo card, so I switch him in and absolutely obliterate this poor coughing for the victory and the Psychic Club medal. Should have taken the duel a little more seriously, Rick. Also, do you have a pencil, or is that a beaker that you're holding, huh? Are you holding a test tube or a pen? It's not relevant, I just don't know. When I was a kid, I always saw it as a test tube, his science and stuff, but it could easily be a pen as well. Anyway, leaving us with only one more required medal in the fighting medal, and half of our deck is super effective against fighting at the moment. I don't think this is gonna be too much of a problem. As much as I would love to just stack psychic Pokemon and blast through this gym, we don't have that many psychic types that we can actually fully utilize. So I went ahead and take some of the birds. Most of the bird type Pokemon are resistant to fighting types. They also just so happen to be normal, pretty easy to splash into any deck. On a side note, I really like this Pidgeot art. That's not really relevant to anything, it just is a nice contrast to whatever this is. It makes me giggle every time I look at it. Somewhat predictably with the way that our deck is set up, it's pretty easy for us to tear through most of the fighting club occupants. We actually have to go to other gyms and find them, which is the most difficult part. Although I guess I shouldn't speak too quickly. In the background here, you'll notice that there is a Tauros fully set up. We actually were completely at the mercy of this Tauros, when for whatever reason our opponent just switched him out to a Machoke. I mean, yeah, they got the KO, but it then was immediately blasted by our Mewtwo, and at that point, the Tauros wasn't set up anymore. This Tauros literally could have just clicked Rampage through our entire team, but for some reason he switched him out. Luckily, mercifully even, I guess. But after we find and defeat all 3 of the fighting club members, we're able to fight Mitch, and well, as it turns out, Mitch's name rhymes with something that's none too nice to say. This was a 5-minute duel. Yeah, we got a little lucky and drew into a Kadabra pretty early, and that Kadabra would systematically tear through every single one of Mitch's Pokemon. Well, I mean, just like in Red, Blue, and Yellow, to be honest. This guy really does seem to be the Bruno of this game, which checks out. He is the fighting club member. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. We're on to the Elite Four. We set up our deck for the first Elite Four member, and we will be able to swap decks in between duels. And first up will be Courtney. Now, Courtney uses a Moltres deck, which specializes on, as most fire cards do, hitting incredibly hard. But also the Moltres that they use has an ability that will allow them to pull a number of fire energies out of their deck from 1 to 4, so they almost always have the fire energies that they need in their hand. With that in mind, I'm going to try to run her out of fire energies. If I can take both energy removals and Golduck, along with using the same Dugong strategy that we used before, we should be able to starve them of their fire energies and not allow them to get these big attacks off that they really want. It's a bit slower of a strategy, but I'm fairly confident in it. Let's run it. So we start off the duel placing Squirtle while our opponent places Magmar. We can't actually use Squirtle, unfortunately. We can use Wartortle, which is actually really solid if we can get it set up, but Squirtle, its only action, has a coin flip associated with it. As we check out our opponent's deck, we can see one of those Moltres cards, 80 damage. The only saving grace is that it is a 50-50 shot whether or not it's going to work. And with that said, it was actually a really rough start. I mean, we have a lot of good later game pieces, but absolutely nothing that we can use right now. Overall, this duel is really not looking good, but we have the pieces. If we can get it all set up, we just need a little bit of time to get this set up, but will we actually get that chance? Well, the next turn we do manage to draw into another Bill, which we use to draw into a Golduck and a Water Energy, which is pretty much best case scenario. This Squirtle is going to be our sacrificial lamb. We're going to try to get this Golduck set up. Again, they have that Hyper Beam attack, which removes an energy from the opponent. After a couple turns, our Squirtle does get knocked out. I could have healed it. I decided not to. Our Golduck will be set up on the turn that we need it to. But with that said, is Golduck actually going to be able to save us? Well, let's find out. And we launch our Hyper Beam into Magmar, causing it to retreat into Moltres. They really don't want to give us that KO. But the thing about this Moltres is it will never get to attack. I will be consistently stripping its energy from it. It will never have more than 1 energy on it at any given time. After a few turns, Golduck does manage to get the KO on Moltres with the help of a Power Plus. After we take that card, our opponent sets a Magmar, but it is a different Magmar this time. This Magmar is much worse for us. This Magmar has Smokescreen, which is a huge problem for us. Smokescreen, if the opponent tries to attack during their next turn after Smokescreen is used, they will have to flip a coin. If tails, it does nothing. We can't take the attack action, which would cause us to flip that coin, So we're kind of stuck here. If the opponent had to flip the coin, then it would be perfectly fine, but we are the ones that have to make the choice to flip the coin, so we're not allowed to attack under the effects of Smokescreen. This essentially makes our Golduck a sitting, well, duck. There's really no way for us to force this Magmar off the field. I know that we need to keep our Golduck in good condition. I decide to bite the bullet. Luckily, it's only actually 1 retreat cost for this Golduck, which is crazy, but we're able to bring out our Seal. The main problem is this is just going to continue happening. There's no reason for that Magmar not to go for Smokescreen. We're going to have to essentially retreat our Pokemon out every single turn. We don't have the energies for that. We were able to get our Golduck to safety, but things are not looking good at this point. We're stuck in this Smokescreen trap at the moment. I don't really have too much of an option but to play this game, so we go for an attack with the Seal before getting hit by yet another Smokescreen, in which we do end up retreating. Luckily, Seal, only 1 retreat cost, into our Golduck, and my thought here is, if I can take that Fire Energy card away, there is a chance that Courtney won't want to use it on this Magmar because it is solo health. And they may not even have the Fire Energy card in their hand. We haven't seen that Moltres yet, but just as I'm thinking that, we see their legendary Moltres card, which looks like a rubber chicken. Okay, the Gameboy Color graphics really did this card dirty, but we get to see that Pokemon power in effect. Fire Giver. Whenever you set Moltres into play, 1 to 4 fire cards are actually placed from your deck into your hand in one of the neatest animations in the game. This means that they have the Fire Energy card in their hand, but what do they choose to do with it? They put it on their Magmar and go for a Smokescreen. Okay, we're back on this again. Kind of looking through my cards right here, I think, okay, we can afford to go through 1 more turn of retreat cycling, and this Magmar will be out of here. We won't have to worry about it anymore. So I attach a double colorless to Jigglypuff, retreat our Golduck back, hit that Magmar with an expand for the KO, and finally Moltres is brought in. It's not going to matter because we are going to swap in Golduck and they're just going to kind of do absolutely nothing of value. I mean, like, actually nothing of value. They didn't attach any energies, they didn't do anything. I guess during this time she did remove 1 of my energies, which was kind of annoying. I guess she just got really rotten draws. That's rough, buddy. Anyway, the Moltres goes down. I feel bad, but I don't feel that bad. And Growlithe is brought in. Growlithe is then evolved into an Arcanine, and with its 3 fire energies, it's able to go for a powerful flamethrower, putting our Golduck at 10 HP, and I have a decision to make here. I will go down to any attack from this Arcanine, and then we will be in a pretty rough place for the rest of her deck. However, with that in mind, based on how she's been playing, I think that was her last Fire Energy, and unless she draws into another Fire Energy, given that her Hyper Beam is going to be removing 1 energy every turn, I think we're actually safe to just Unga Bunga into this Arcanine, and that is exactly what we do. They're not able to do anything, and we get the KO. Moltres is then brought in. This is just sad at this point. This Moltres will never get to attack, and likewise, it also gets knocked out by the Golduck. Magmar is brought out, and it does manage to get the KO onto our Golduck. We actually have another Golduck set up in the backline and ready to go. And at this point, you know, this match is pretty much over. Courtney just can't keep up. They actually do bring in a Ninetales at some point, which is a very scary ability in Dancing Embers. Essentially, you flip 8 coins. This attack does 10 damage for each heads, which means it could do up to 80 damage. That would be a huge problem. Luckily, we get almost the most average luck. The first attack does 50 damage, which is nothing to scoff at, don't get me wrong. Ninetales takes out Golduck the next turn with another Dancing Embers, but at this point, Ninetales is left with 40 HP. We swap in a Staryu, of all things, and hit it with a powerful slap to end the duel. And now we're on to Steve, which I believe. That's a ancient reference. Anyway, moving forward. Oh, and by the way, these 4 individuals here are actually called Grandmasters, not the Elite Four. Forgive me. So anyway, the second member of the Grandmasters, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. But our next opponent, Steve, his deck is based around Zapdos, and Zapdos' Pokemon power essentially allows it to, whenever it is placed on the field or on the bench, it'll do 30 damage to a random Pokemon other than Zapdos. This can be your Pokemon, it can be his Pokemon. It shares that effect with its big Thunder attack for 3 lightning energy, chooses a Pokemon at random other than Zapdos, and does 70 damage to that Pokemon. Neither of these abilities take into consideration weakness or resistance, so yes, in between duels, I did make a ground type deck or a fighting type deck with electric resistances. That won't matter if this card hits the field, so it's going to be my goal to make sure that doesn't happen. As well as keeping my bench pretty light. If he does manage to set this card on the field, he's more likely to do damage to himself than he is to me. But I can't stall anymore, let's get into the fight with Steve. And in a complete mockery of anything resembling good luck. First off, we only draw a Jigglypuff. That's not particularly good. However, the Electabuzz that is put on the opposite side of the field then goes for a plus power boosted Thunder Shock. The plus power is whatever, but notably it does paralyze us. Not a good start at all. Luckily we do have a build card, we're able to use that to get a Mr. Mime. So at least we won't lose the match immediately, and just in time too. Electabuzz would knock out our Jigglypuff next turn. Somewhat mercifully, we do draw into a Rhyhorn. I think we're going to stabilize after this. We have a resistance. We should be good to slow this game down a little bit, take it more at our pace. With the help of a double colorless energy, we're able to get Rhyhorn set up for battle the next turn, which we do swap it in, and get the KO on that Electabuzz. And our opponent sets one of those Zapdos. Now, we can't do anything to it. It can't really do anything to us yet, so we're kind of at a stalemate. But I have a feeling if we let this go on for too long, that Zapdos is going to be a huge problem. So I do want to take affirmative action pretty quickly. To that end, in the interest of getting things moving, I decided to retreat Rhyhorn into Mewtwo, which we had drawn actually as our first prize card, attach 1 Psychic Energy to it, and use Energy Absorption. And this is also where I learned that you can pull double colorless energies out of the discard pile with this ability. But at this point, our Mewtwo is fully set up, ready to go. Our opponent, apparently understanding that, swaps out the Zapdos into an Eevee, which of course is going to try to stall us out with Tail Wag. Essentially, flip a coin. If heads, the defending Pokemon can't attack Eevee next turn. Of course, we lose that every day of the week. Although, it doesn't say that a different Pokemon can't attack Eevee, so we use Switch into Hitmonchan, going for a jab, hitting it for 40 damage, which forces our opponent to switch back into Zapdos, which is actually perfectly fine. Because we have a surplus of fighting energies in our hand, we're actually able to go for a Special Punch, which hits through its resistance for 10 damage, meaning that next turn that Zapdos is out of here. A different fresh Eevee replaces it, goes for Tail Wag, fails the coin flip, we get the KO on the next turn, which is then replaced by a Voltorb, and our opponent finally sets their legendary Zapdos card, which has the Peal of Thunder ability, which allows it to randomly attack a Pokemon somewhere on the field. Unfortunately, it does hit our Mr. Mime. Not the worst option, but it does get the KO, giving our opponent 1 prize card. Steve then switches into said Zapdos, and I'm kind of in a bit of an awkward position right now. I really don't want to let this Zapdos get set up. That is the last thing I want to do, but of course retreating is a bit costly. I decided to go for it anyway, discard the 2 fighting energy off of Hitmonchan in order to bring Mewtwo back in, which is actually able to do some solid damage to the Zapdos, eventually picking up the KO. Our opponent brings in Electrode and immediately goes for a double plus power boosted Sonic Boom, doing massive damage to our Mewtwo and putting him in range of a KO next turn. Luckily, we're able to switch it to Rhyhorn, which interestingly enough, Steve doesn't attack into our Rhyhorn. Why didn't you do anything? Oh, they probably don't actually know about the resistance negation of Sonic Boom, so they just see that they wouldn't be able to do over 30 damage to a resist. Well, that's unfortunate for them. Not my problem, you stupid. Oh. Oh. Well, that's unfortunate. You really should have thought about that. The odds were in your favor, but it did not go well for you. Okay, well, moving on from that, up next is Jack. Jack uses an Articuno deck, which can do massive damage to not only your Pokemon, but your bench Pokemon as well as his legendary card. Just being set has a chance to paralyze the Pokemon in the active zone, which is as powerful as it sounds, really. My plan going into this duel will be to use electric and water type cards, centered around Electrode and its Chain Lightning ability, as well as Golduck for, of course, Hyper Beam, starving the opponent of their valuable energies. I do need to be a little bit careful. Chain Lightning, while yes, it will attack all of a similar typed Pokemon on the opponent side of the field, it'll also do the same thing to my side of the field, so I need to be very careful with that. But I think overall, given our primary will be electric, I think this is a great strategy for us to use. This is yet again another battle. We want to keep our bench relatively scant. But I'm done stalling here, so let's see how Jack went. Starting off the duel, things are not looking particularly good. Our opponent Jack is able to place 3 Pokemon on the bench. We are only able to place 1 Pokemon in the active zone, and our Voltorb is exerting absolutely no offensive pressure to the opponent's Chansey at this point. But you know what, we have come back from relatively rough starts before, so can we do it again? Well, looking at our opponent's backline, it's not looking particularly good, and we haven't actually drawn into anything useful. I decided to play a Gust of Wind that'll bring in the Articuno. My hope is that I can get some vital damage down onto it before it's ready to essentially wipe through my entire team, not remembering that Articuno is not weak to electric type attacks. Next turn, we managed to draw into a Pikachu, which is at least something on the bench, but you can see that Articuno is getting set up, and it's looking a little spooky at the moment. I like a lot of the cards in my hand. I like maybe holding out to get Golduck set up, otherwise I could use this Professor Oak, but then the odds of me drawing into another Golduck are very low, so discarding that Golduck is quite a tall order. I decided to split the difference and go for a maintenance, which actually does end up being our Psyduck. So this strategy can work, but I really need to pull it off now. And that's really good news, but unfortunately Articuno is now set up and ready to start throwing out these freeze dries. Essentially it's a 50-50 shot that we get paralyzed and it does 30 damage. Of course we're paralyzed. It doesn't really matter that much, because we are setting up for Golduck at this moment. This Voltorb is pretty much a non-factor at the moment. We are then able to evolve our Psyduck into a Golduck, which will allow us to use our Professor Oak for some solid card advantage. We do manage to draw into both a Voltorb Electrode and a Jigglypuff Wigglytuff combo, which is actually quite nice, but at this point I really need energies more than anything else. And a lot of times I'll be doing commentary while doing these challenges just so that I can sort of remind myself sort of my thought process as I'm going through it. And Past Me was really not happy with this hand. This is dog shit. So yeah, I don't exactly remember what I was hoping to get out of this. I mean, this hand isn't amazing, but I mean, I don't think it's that bad. Articuno then knocks out Voltorb, and here is where I misplay. I decided to send in Golduck, even though they are such a valuable player, and just hope that I draw an energy. I mean, the odds of me drawing an energy are relatively high, but also, why would I do this? I could have sent Pikachu in, kept Golduck on the bench, let the Pikachu get knocked out, and then send the Golduck in later when it's ready. I think this is an example of me just absolutely tunnel visioning on this Golduck strategy to a fault. And off of that one misplay, I would lose this entire duel. This Articuno absolutely just steamrolled us from here on out, so we lost this duel. And losing here brings up the question, should I restart the entire Duel Masters Gauntlet? I decided no, because one, you can change your deck in between duels, and the game lets you save between duels, so we're just going to go ahead and pick right back up with Jack. I think I did pretty much the exact same deck. To be fair, we got pretty unlucky in the beginning of the last duel, so let's try Jack again. And you know what, the rematch with Jack would actually start a lot like the first duel with him. We got a really rough start, but it is Voltorb versus Chansey again. We are at least able to evolve our Voltorb into an Electrode. God, that card art still... wow. We are able to get Electrode set up without taking any damage, as we use a Gust of Wind on Chansey to bring out a Lapras, hitting it with a Chain Lightning, and this is going to be a 2-hit KO. Our opponent places another Lapras on the bench. This is relevant because now our Chain Lightning will do 10 damage to that Lapras as well, meaning we get a knockout on this Lapras, as well as a valuable 10 damage on the next Lapras. As Jack sets Chansey, I'm still worried about those scoop up strats. I know he's gonna do it. As soon as I let my guard down, he's gonna scoop up that Chansey, alright? I've wasted so much time. But I don't have much of a choice but to just attack into the Chansey. Some damage is better than no damage. I then swap Electrode into Wigglytuff to preserve it for later. And we're not doing a lot of damage with this Wigglytuff, and you're not gonna believe it. Finally, after all of this mention of someone scooping up a Chansey, he finally does it. Oh, you ready for the scoop? Here it comes. Up, scoop up, whoop. I'm glad it happened at least once in the run, so I don't sound crazy. Jack then puts down his Articuno card, activating its Quick Freeze ability. Unfortunately, it does get the paralysis on us. Jack then uses Scoop Up on that Articuno, so it can, of course, put it back on the field next turn. Not sure why it didn't just do it this turn, but thank you for the mercy, I guess. And these are some of the shenanigans that I was sort of expecting going into the Elite Four, which they didn't actually do too many of them this time, just kind of weird. But finally, and after all that, all this stalling and everything, our Wigglytuff finally gets a knockout on the Ditto, and we yet again have a Chansey placed in front of us, which at least we do get the knockout on a couple turns later, but unfortunately that has bought just enough time for our opponent's Articuno to get set up, going for a Freeze Dry, and of course, getting the paralysis on us yet again. Oh, cool, I love it. I'm having a great time, guys. I'm having a real good time. Oh, Switch, would you look at that? As you can see, I'm super happy about it. It's really cool and awesome. Luckily, as you saw, we draw into a Switch. And it's time to let our boy Electrode shine. So we swap in our Electrode, let a massive chain lightning ripple through his entire bench, and it's really satisfying until we get paralyzed next turn. And just like that, the card that was going to do the most damage is knocked out because of that paralysis. I even used a maintenance to try and draw into a full heal or a switch or something to help me out. I just couldn't make it happen. And it was about this time that I realized this could very well be one of the most inconsistent decks that I've ever built in any card game. It's really bad. Either that or my luck has been absolutely abysmal. I built this deck like I do any other deck. The same ratios and everything like that. I have no idea why this deck specifically is so rough. And I think this is one of the times where the actual challenge of this run of not being able to flip a coin really does hurt us. A lot of electric type Pokemon have coin flips associated with them. And it's a really hard sell to bring something that would be your bread and butter like a Magnemite when you can't use half of the card. For example, the Magnemite card, you have either the option to go for a paralysis, which is a coin flip, or self-destruct. So those cards are pretty much not an option. I'm working with what I have, and it's not much. And with that in mind, we put up a pretty good fight, but we lose this duel with Jack as well. Oh, this is definitely the hardest duel in the game for us, like by far. Jack embodies every problem that I have with this game. The frustrating stall strategies, the coin flips, and it is a genuinely tough duel, especially if you're under our restrictions and have like 4 electric type Pokemon that you can even use. And starting the duel, you can tell I'm having a really good time, and I'm very happy right now. I'm ready to chronically get the worst fucking luck possible. Yeah, that sounds about right. So I'm really having fun. And the weird thing is, I'm looking at this deck, right? It has about the same ratios as any other deck that I normally use. I'm just getting really unlucky. So I genuinely think probably the best thing for me to do is just keep trying until I get at least passable luck. We managed to get a Pikachu and a Voltorb while our opponent sets a seal. We can see he's actually planning to get the second seal set up. So this one is essentially a sacrificial lamb. With that in mind, we play an energy removal, hopefully gain some sort of energy advantage. Unfortunately, we do have to play an energy search to get a second electric energy to get our Pikachu off the ground, but that does allow us to do a spark attack, doing 10 damage to the seal in the back as well as 40 damage to the seal in front of us. And what I'm thinking here is, since we're doing 40 damage, if he puts the seal in without evolving it, if we can attack this seal twice, the seal in the back will essentially take 20 damage, meaning that we'll be able to one-shot it as soon as it hits the field. Pikachu gets the knockout on seal while doing 20 damage to the seal in the back, just as we had planned. This does, however, cause Jack to pivot into Lapras, meaning that we do have to contend with Confuse Ray, but surely we'll just get lucky and that won't be a problem. Okay, here we go. Lapras knocks out Pikachu, but that's fine. We've begun to pivot into Electrode. I actually had a Clefairy doll on my bench. I'm not sure why I didn't send it out, knowing that Electrode could get confused at any moment, but I guess Tackle and Chain Lightning both do the same amount of damage to the active Pokemon. It's just whether or not they hit the bench Pokemon, so it's not a huge deal, but something that in retrospect I probably would have done a little bit differently. This actually causes Lapras to retreat into Ditto. Okay, we take it. I go for a power boost to Chain Lightning to do 30 damage. This will make it so that next turn, assuming this Ditto doesn't transform, something that I would really like to avoid it doing, we can get the KO, and we do manage to get the KO on Ditto next turn, as our opponent sends in Seal. This is the perfect scenario for our Electrode to be in. All of the Pokemon on his bench are Water type. This Chain Lightning is about to ripple all the way through his bench. Next turn, Electrode will get a KO on that Seal, again doing great damage to the opponent's backline, as our opponent sends in the Lapras from earlier, and actually fails the Confuse Ray, so we're not confused yet. Even when he inevitably does confuse us, it's fine, we have a full heal in the back, so we are actually sitting very pretty at the moment. Looking at it right now, we are set up to get a triple KO when we knock out this Lapras. And I'm not sure that there's anything Jack can do to stop that. The one thing he can hope to do, he could send in the Chansey. We have a Gust of Wind that we can set as well, so this is a pin. We've won this game effectively. So let's just watch the last turn in all of its satisfying glory. I win. Alright, here comes the satisfaction. Ooh, there's a knockout. There's a knockout. There's a knockout. Oh, draw 3 prize cards, huh? Yeah, I think I will. Well, that feels real good after all the trouble you gave me, Jack. But we don't have much time to celebrate it. It's time for our duel with the final Elite Four member, Rod, and his legendary Dragonite deck. And Rod's deck is actually pretty spooky. He has a combination of fire and water Pokemon, which can be a little bit difficult to handle under our restrictions, as well as his Dragonite has the Pokemon power Healing Wind, which essentially says whenever you put Dragonite into play, you remove 2 damage counters from each of your Pokemon. So you can imagine you can heal 80 damage from your team. Unlike the legendary birds, it is a 3rd tier evolution, so we can kind of see it coming. I am genuinely a little bit spooked about this deck, but let's see how that goes. I'm just realizing that I would normally talk about the deck right now. I don't have any footage of it, so I don't know. But anyway, starting off the duel, our opponent sets a Lapras, and to be honest, there's not a whole lot I can do to this Lapras at the moment. I'm mostly assuming that I'm about to get confused at any minute, and that's pretty much curtains for our Jigglypuff, so I'm thinking I'm going to set up the backline instead. However, we don't get confused. In fact, now we just have a Lapras that has 3 water energies set on it. Luckily, we hit it with a Spark and it is spooked out by our Pikachu, going into a Charmander. A couple turns later, our Pikachu is able to knock out the Charmander while doing some solid damage to the backline. And it is actually because of the damage to said backline. As soon as the Charmander comes in, we are able to get a KO on it as well. These sort of chain lightning damage the backline effects have been really useful the last 2 fights. Our opponent then sets Lapras before placing Kangaskhan into play and using a switch to switch in said Kangaskhan. And Kangaskhan can be really annoying. It has a lot of HP, and it only actually has 1 ability that allows you to draw a card. So it is a very solid momentum piece. Luckily, we have our Hitmonchan in the back to make short work of this Kangaskhan. Seeing that we are threatening the KO, our opponent uses a switch to switch Kangaskhan back into Lapras, who on the next turn is knocked out by our Hitmonchan. And wow, I'm just gonna save our time here. Hitmonchan would claim the rest of our prize cards, meaning that we have defeated Rod and all of the Elite Four. Surely that means we get the good cards now, right? Nah. We have to fight Ronald and his, don't make me say it, legendary Ronald deck. This is exactly why I can't take this man seriously. This legendary Ronald deck will give him access to all 4 of the legendary cards that we just dueled for, which in my opinion kinda just means that he's going to be fighting for what energies he needs at any given time. So I'm not too worried about this duel, but the individual components are quite powerful, so let's see how that went. Well, starting off, you'll see we placed a Pikachu and have nothing on our bench, as our opponent Ronald places a Kangaskhan, and that's actually pretty spooky, as he will be able to essentially outdraw me, and starting off with that type of an advantage is a pretty big deal. I decide to play a Gust of Wind to get that Kangaskhan out of here and draw in one of those Dratini, hoping that I can cut off the Dragonite strategy right here, right now. Plus it'll be very nice to disrupt the strategy of him just drawing a bunch of cards. We're able to use an energy removal to hopefully stop this Dratini from getting set up, but we're not really exerting any pressure at all with our Pikachu. I just can't draw the energy cards that I need right now. And as you can see, we are struggling. Finally, we draw into Hitmonchan, something actually very useful, which we of course will be placing on our bench and then swapping into the active position. The next turn, we get the KO on the Dratini, and our opponent replaces that Dratini with a fresh Dratini. Of course, a couple turns later, that Dratini is knocked out by our Hitmonchan. Kangaskhan is then brought in, and our Hitmonchan is absolutely putting in work here, and we'll get the KO on the Kangaskhan 2 turns later, who is then replaced by an Eevee. Things really couldn't be looking any better, although our opponent does set his Moltres card, activating the Fire Giver ability, drawing him some valuable Fire-type energies, and of course he gets the maximum of 4. It's a championship battle. Of course the game has to give him good RNG, right? Eevee then retreats into said Moltres, and we have a bit of a problem here. Like, a really big problem. We were looking real good last turn. I am now not too confident. I have nothing to break this Moltres. I decide to play a switch card and get our Hitmonchan out of there, replacing it with a Voltorb. They're going to be able to do the same amount of damage given that Moltres is resistant to fighting types. And after a couple turns, Ronald's Moltres is set up and able to throw out these powerful dive bombs. The only recourse we have right now is that this relies on a coin flip. If he fails the coin flip, the attack does nothing. So how many times do you think we're going to get lucky? Well, none. Absolutely none. This Moltres will pick up a KO on every single turn until the end of the match, and we lost that one. Well, I don't really know what to do differently. Again, we got pretty unlucky. The 3 legendary birds are just one of those cards that are pretty difficult to deal with. They don't have any weaknesses, and they do have a resistance to fighting types. Hitmonchan was our big hitter in this duel, so what do we do about that? I took a little while to look at my deck, making some significant alterations. I'm actually going to go with a water strategy again, because a lot of the legendary cards do require large amounts of energy. If I can starve them of their energy, same old song and dance, we've been here before. You know how this water deck works by now. How does this water deck stand up against the 4 legendary cards? Well, already turn 0, we're looking way better. We're sitting on 2 Bills, a Rattata, and a Seal, as well as an Energy Search and a Golduck. We are looking quite good at the moment. I decided to put Rattata on the active position, while Ronald sets one of those Dratini, and notably, because Rattata can do 20 damage for just 1 water energy, we are able to get some incredibly important damage down right on the first turn. Rattata knocks out Dratini, taking 10 damage in the process, as our opponent sends in Eevee. However, he then sets an Articuno on the bench, although we don't end up getting paralyzed by its Pokemon power, so very lucky there. We're able to get some damage on this Eevee, or at least we would if it didn't go for Tail Wag, essentially meaning that Rattata cannot damage Eevee on our turn. However, it doesn't say that Rattata can't attack, so I decided to use a Gust of Wind to bring in Articuno before it is ready, and we have the Rat versus the legendary bird. Truly a battle for the ages. After a few turns of racking up damage on this Articuno, we retreat our Rattata, which again is completely free, great bit of utility there, into a Dugong to secure the KO, and Eevee takes Articuno's place, but is quickly knocked out with our Aurora Beam, doing exactly 50 damage, just enough for the 1-hit KO. is then replaced by an Eevee, who is of course knocked out 1 turn later. Our opponent then sets another Dratini before setting his Zapdos on the bench, doing 30 damage to our Rattata, frying the poor little guy. He only had 30 HP to begin with. And, okay. Dratini evolves into a Dragonair. Dragonair can do 60 damage, assuming both coin flips are heads with its Slam attack. Luckily, absolutely flubs the luck, does 0 damage. Both of those coin flips were tails. This is exactly why we don't want to rely on coin flips. Our boy Ronald here is demonstrating relying on luck. Maybe not the best strategy. Our Dugong actually manages to get the Dragonair low, but Ronald really said, nope, you're not getting the KO on this. Uses a scoop up, but on his Zapdos, then immediately placing said Zapdos, and it shocks his Dragonair, knocking it out. And I think at this point, our opponent has essentially accepted defeat. They bring in their Zapdos, and they do nothing for the rest of the duel, allowing us to take the victory as the legendary cards just decide they no longer wish to be in his deck, which is kind of funny, honestly. I guess you'll just have to call it the Ronald deck from now on, not so legendary anymore. That's a terrible joke. Anyway, but yes, we are allowed to obtain the 4 legendary cards, and I remember thinking to myself as soon as I got these, I am never going to use any of these. These are all none of these are very good. No. Not at all. But that does mean that yes, you can beat the original Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy Color without ever causing a coin flip. Would I say that this was a good challenge? I would say it's kind of one of those challenges that is not super difficult. It's not one of these super crazy challenges. It's something that a normal person could do, when they get off work or something. Which I think is kind of what I want these challenges to be. Things that really anyone would be able to pick up and kind of just a new fun way to play the game. This one definitely slides right in the very manageable category. Honestly, the hardest part about this challenge was not having a flare-up of epilepsy, because the amount of flashing in this game is crazy. But anyway, with that in mind, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It does help me out an awful lot. If you're interested in more challenge content like this, please recommend a game and a challenge that you want me to try, and I will give it a crack. Thank you so much to all of the supporters on all of the channels. And with that, I'm Newbornkilik, and I will see you in the next one. I'm out.